It's the 16th already of January 2023. So my goodness. We got a nuclear news cycle we're going to meander through. Hope everybody's doing good. Everybody's busy beating the shit out of the nuke-tart industry. It's a good thing. And there's nothing good about nuclear, is what we sadly discovered. They are responsible for just the emissions is a catastrophic event for our planet. And so at all costs, we got to stop them from finding another planet and put nuclear power plants on it. Because you know what's going to happen, right? Exactly. You got to treat nuclear power plants as like a meteorite coming at your planet. And I've been saying this for a decade, I know. Welcome, everybody, worldwide. Hope you're having a wonderful day, if that's possible anymore. I'm on scumbag YouTube, unfortunately. I apologize. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell. Not that it's going to work, but hey, you can be able to give me a like. You never know, right? There's oodles and oodles and oodles of social networking sites if you want to get active and promote my reality. I'd be appreciative of it. Except for the trolls, of course. Hello, nuke-tart. That's a typical pro-nuclear right there. How's it going, scumbag? So, you're raising your kids up to think that if you have an issue, the Hulk is going to fix it, or Spider-Man, whatever the frig that is. Created by the nuclear industry, I might add, just to lull you into a deep sleep of complacency. And you got oodles and oodles of heroes. You can't, like the Krypton is a real isotope. It'll kill your children. It'll burn a hole through your lung and get into their bones and mutate their stem cells. It's not going to turn them into superheroes. The children no longer look at their parents or their grandparents as superheroes. Well, Dana Wolfman is immune to radiation from nuclear power plants. He's a superhero, Dana, and you got a superhero for everything, and it's hard to find the good one in the pile. And when it's cartoons, you can rule them out right away. I don't know all these superheroes, but you got GoPro heroes, for goodness sakes. The most despicable thing you could do was take the word hero and attach it to a camera. That's truly, besides Guitar Hero, I suppose. Remember, in the old days, we got rid of our problems, right? And guess what? That was the end of your problem. There was an incentive for evil not to show its twisted little minds. Now your minds are twisted with alternate realities. You're still the dinosaurs. Just kidding. But these creatures, these monsters are real. These are actually real. These are real. I'm going to introduce you to a whole bunch of them. They're known as the nuclear industry. No cartoons here, unfortunately. No siree, Bob. Poor Bob. A few updates for Fukushima nuclear power plants I came across. First off, from all that cement in the background, that's not normal. That's because the fuel rods landed back there. They buried it. What did they got built on back of the water facility? The old pump house for the reactors. These will pump 1 million gallons per minute into each of the reactors. On top of it, remember the holes? They finally put plates there. They're just they just laid it there with a crane or something. Nobody's actually physically going to go up there. It's a lethal doses. If you look at this is reactor, the stump of reactor 4, they built, or reactor 3, they built a off-site a contraption to manipulate you. But if you look at the side of it, you can see right into the buildings. They still haven't cleaned the debris off reactor 2 roof. And you can see the debris still stacked up high at reactor 4, despite the fact they said they got all the fuel out of the building, everything looks perfect. And the list goes on. And then they got the cover, the sarcophagus, Kevlar sarcophagus off reactor 1 behind my rectangular head I got. So we got a pole. I'm going to bring that in, maybe. I can't have two in the same picture, Dana. I'm sorry. Apologize. Okay, I apologize. Our nuclear reactor power plants, nuclear fuel rod pools, doomsday machines. And we have a outstanding 100% yes. For those who are not aware, I can probably sum this up in the next 60 seconds, but I'm not going to stop there. I will provide that much information. Okay, so man-made anthropogenic radiation, not like bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine. No, unfortunately, there is no such thing as a safe level from man-made anthropogenic isotopes. But the allowable radiation standards, the International Atomic Energy Agency, aka United Nations, and by proxy all the other useful lapdogs of the industry utilizes, are based on benefit. So there is no benefit in man-made. I'll quantify that in a minute. Not safety. So in other words, they're not using man-made radiation instead of standard for man-made radiation. They're using harmless, everyday, stupid, background, irrelevant, it's not even radiation, so-called emitters. And every species on the planet, every bacteria and fungus included, you included, are already acclimated to the natural stuff through genetic superior selection. That's why you exist. That is the stardust itself. But the stuff from the reactors doesn't come from the sun. Those elements are not created in the solar system, so we call them man-made elements like plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium. These are not natural stuff. And when they try to pretend that some of these are equal to something in nature, that's all they're doing is pretending. So the International Atomic Energy Agency admitted that they have no standards. There's a good reason, because 11 becquerels, which is just such a small amount, you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But 11 of them will start to see heart problems in children. They're only acknowledging cesium, which is one of the 5 emitters, which is a gamma. And you can't just get cesium without the other alphas, neutrons, betas, and x-rays, etc., etc. Top cancer doctor. He's got some street creds, right? Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. This is why the International Atomic Energy Agency are basing their upon benefit, not safety. In other words, not basing it on man-made. So that's a bit of a problem, because everything on the planet with replicating cells has no autoimmune trigger to defend against anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout or your supermarkets, and I'll explain that to you. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. 50 becquerels is not very much, and that's way above their limits. And inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer, but there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. So just one hot particle, and everything from a nuclear meltdown is a hot particle. Okay, we're almost there. So irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. 50 becquerels a kilogram in adults is permanent lesions on their organs. But what about you eating it every day? What about you breathing it? Like the Ottawa, people in Ottawa, where the CANDU reactors, the doomsday machines in Canada, we call them nuclear reactors. The numbers they're dumping into the Great Lakes is horrific. That they actually emit to. That they actually emit to. I could finally bring that up in a second to you. Here you go. I apologize for not having it ready. You probably understand if you stay for the show. I can't do everything. So they're only acknowledging tritium, and the releases are right by the intakes for the fresh water for several million people in Toronto, by the way. So where they discharge is right alongside the same facility that sucks the water into Ontario, Toronto, and Ottawa. So they're talking about trillion becquerels into the air. Now they're talking about totals. So if you look at Bruce Power at the top, it's 731 trillion physical atoms into the freshwater lakes each year. That's legal. And Pickering is 500 times a trillion atoms each year. Now, Darlington and Gentilia and Point Lapeer, so the list keeps going and going. It's hard to appreciate these numbers. Tritium Light Factory, located at Peterborough Airport in Ontario, released... this is a factory that makes lights that glow in the dark, like exit lights and stuff like that, emergency lights. Released 147 trillion becquerels of tritium to the atmosphere in 5 minutes. And they didn't tell anybody till 2012 because there's no checks and balances. So they raised the limit, the safe limit, to 34 million trillion becquerels is a legal release into the environment each year. And they take full advantage of it from many different sources. The nuclear plants, multiple nuclear plants doing it, and multiple light facilities doing it. Okay. That's important for what I'm showing you, how significant just a tiny fraction is to a human life. Now, the other problem with the equation is, before we jump into the news cycle, and holy crap, we got a lot of news to get through. So we're trying to quantify the pole for everybody. And the pole is our nuclear reactor power plants and nuclear fuel rods, pools, doomsday machines. Now, if you go watch my show last night, Japan has already dumped the tanks into the ocean, which is just meant to get your attention because they've been dumping it for 12 years straight. The documentation they're providing that seals the deal. But the big question is, why did they build a majority of nuclear power plants in prime farmland, in some cases with communities close by? Because they know the amount of radiation. Now, each of the power plants, each reactor typically has 2 fuel pools. And they take the reactor cores out and put it in a pool. And they do this for 4 decades or so, 5 decades, 6 decades. So the pools are still splitting the same atoms. The pools have no containment, so the amount of radiation... Now, when they put the reactor core into the pools, so-called pools of water, say 30 feet deep, they're still splitting the same atoms you would for 1 million homes. Now, they call it, used fuel, but it's only 2% of it got used. 98% of it is still active. It no longer has a containment. It's now hemorrhaging that. And this doesn't do it justice what I'm showing you. But it's just meant to get you on track. So a child's risk to cancer. Now, don't think about yourselves only and your children. Remember, you're the steward of the planet, whether you like it or not. Because without the species, you can't exist. Without the bees, you don't get to have wonderful foods, for instance. So child's risk of radiation is 100 times more. So going to your supermarket is now problematic. First off, you got to learn where all the nuclear power plants are worldwide and whether this food was grown within a couple of 100 miles of it. If it was, you don't want nothing to do with it. You also got to worry about all the dumping that they done in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, all the nuclear testing. You got to worry about all of that because the stuff never goes away. You got to worry about everything they dumped in the ocean, and Britain done it for 30 years. You got to worry about events like Santa Susana, which is equal to 460 3-mile islands worth of radioactive fallout. You got to worry about this incredibly secretive industry legacy of 80 years. The nuclear wars that they had, you call it nuclear testing, you got to be worried sick about that. And so it's hard to keep track of it. And in order to tell the story, you got to go on and on and on and on and on with all these horror stories over and over, everywhere from every direction to try to give some context, because you can't really do context. It'll take 12, 14 hours to do the context because it's so pervasive. And the industry is heartless. It's incredibly, revoltingly, generationally untenable what it's doing to us and all the species. Let me give you one more example. Besides, low doses causes heart attacks and lung problems and liver problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome. Some of the nuclear bombs were equal to 3,800 Hiroshimas going off at the one time. That's a nuclear war. You can deny it. I would love to be you, because I can't. This is 19 days, by the way, after Fukushima. Continuous plume covering the planet. Do you think the plume, the radiation, stopped coming out? Do you really think that it didn't get worse? Do you? And for 80 years, these emissions... Now, this is based on venting. It's not even based on the actual inventories that were lost at just one of the reactors in Japan. You wouldn't be able to see any lines. 80 years of it, pulsing energy every second. Just that on its own is a doomsday machine, see? But the fact that you can't, pre-Fukushima, you couldn't go anywhere on the planet without your Geiger counter saying 30. I didn't have a Geiger counter tonight, some of you most likely noticed. And that's so we can have graphics. That we might never use, Dana. I hear you. The big problem is the big problem is there's two of me. Let me try that again. I got to remember to start using this. I have a amazing technology that most people don't even understand, and it can enhance the show, right? There's a nuclear scientist getting off the planet before it's all too late. Hey guys, don't shit on my desk, eh? You want some liberty? Here's your liberty. Come get some freedom. There's your freedom for you. So 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, you start to see heart problems. So imagine how little, because children are fairly big compared to ants and spiders and caterpillars, beautiful, wonderful other species besides the human species. And so when 11 becquerels is going to hurt children, how much is it going to take to hurt your dog? How much is it going to take to hurt your cat, your hamsters? How much is it going to take to hurt your spiders? How much is it going to take to hurt the bacteria and the fungus? Because it's going to. And it's very little compared to what it takes to hurt a child. And when I mean hurt a child is has messed them up permanently for the rest of their lives. So why are all farms surrounded by nuclear disease factories known as nuclear power plants? Okay, so we got to get into the news cycle because I can actually go at this, and I got so much documentation, so much evidence. There is no debate, unfortunately. All right, so we got a huge news cycle from a little bit from the weekend and a lot from today. And we're just going to at some point get started. Another thing about the nuclear industry is Fukushima food wasn't just Fukushima Prefecture that was banned for a decade by 55 countries. It was 14 prefectures. Canada, and that wasn't one of them. They removed all restrictions within 93 days. So Japan couldn't ship it anywhere but Canada. And because it takes a decade or two or three to really take its toll to sterilize you and all the species, it seems like there never was that many birds, there never was that many bees, there never was that many spiders. On the East Coast, we don't have spiders in the forest. They only live on your houses and your trucks and your vehicles and your garbage cans because they don't suck up radiation and pulse energy every second almost at the speed of light. Oh, I keep cutting James off. Hang on, James. I thought I canceled you for a second. You're live. We got James Lucid on the line. Hang on, James. I messed up. Okay, now I got you. It's my apologies.
No, you just sparked this total thing that went through me when you mentioned about South Korea because I was on this. Over the weekend, this guy had this live show. There wasn't very many people on, but I've been on there before, and he was talking about South Korea. And I put in the chat, I'm like, South Korea is the only country that banned the foods from Fukushima and surrounding areas. And Hillary, on the other hand, she just raised the safe limits and passed it all through. And so he commented on this about how South Korea, but instead of just like going on a tangent about South Korea, he deflected.
You're breaking up a bit, James. You're breaking up a bit, my friend.
Oh, am I?
Just keep your voice closer. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm right. You're right.
Still breaking.
Is this a little bit better?
Still breaking. Go ahead. You're okay. You're okay. You'll be okay.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted him to. He went on to this whole thing about how Fukushima was a disaster, but that's that we still have to understand that nuclear energy is still viable because it's the only form of energy that can produce the power we need. And I'm like, this guy's crazy. And I'm thinking, so I told him, I'm like, listen, hydrogen, on the other hand, would be the answer for all our needs, but it's being stonewalled because of Clyde Sanderson and everything else. And we can't get anywhere, so we're stuck with. And this guy's a smart guy, thing I couldn't figure out. And he doesn't understand, so I had to remind him. I'm like, listen, we still need coal and gas power plants just to operate a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
So what sense does that make? It's like, just because, you need a little bit of input power to, and he's like, he just kept going off about how all the experts he listens to, I'm like, all the experts you listen to, like the same ones that tell you to get your booster shot. I mean, it was just one of these things that
frustrating.
made me realize that there are really smart people out there that are on this hamster wheel. But what they don't realize is that they're on this nuclear fuel cycle hamster wheel. There's no end to it. They don't get it. They just don't understand. And I don't know what it will take to really get these people on board to understand that they've been lied to, because That's the last thing that they really want, because they have a lot of pride built up in their feeling, thinking, they got it all figured out.
Yeah.
But when it comes to nuclear energy, oh, no, that's a good thing, right? Yeah. All the experts say that's great, right? And that's the one thing I think that they're not going to be able to live with themselves, if they know how wrong they are, with just how screwed up this system is that it made them believe it. But I just don't know what it will take. I'm just thinking, we're the tip of the spear here, Dana. I mean, we all get it, but how we help these other people that are very smart and don't understand. That's all I wanted to call about. I'm just so confused about this concept.
Thank you, James. Yeah, it's a good call.
All right. Thank you, James.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. God bless. Yeah. Bye. Yeah, it raises some difficult questions, don't it? Like a lot of them just never grew up. They grew up with a silver spoon, and they never struggled, and they don't understand what value actually is. They don't covet things because it was handed to them all their lives. For a lot of them, and I complain about this a lot, where I say the inbreedings of the inbreed of the inbreed of the inbreed, and current generation is coasting, right? And they live in this latte, which is nothing wrong with lattes, but they live in that yuppie type latte. Nothing wrong with yuppie. Send your hate mail to Dana at, never mind. But there's this, like my poll tonight really is screaming. It's a screaming panic. Our nuclear reactor power plants, nuclear fuel rod pools, doomsday machines. So most people can't wrap their mind around a plant, let a fuel pool. And the fuel pool is the wickedest thing imaginable. The reactor has a containment. The fuel pool doesn't. Once you take it out of the reactor after 18 months or so, that's pulsing atoms all day into the water. The water evaporates all day long. There's 1,000 fuel pools on the planet. And each one of them, each fuel pool, if you put the numbers into it, would create plumes similar to this right here. But it's going on all day, 365 days a year after year for decades, released into your environment. It gets sucked up it gets taken by the rain, it gets swallowed up by the ocean, it assimilates in the trees, it becomes pollen, radioactive pollen. And it's like we're reaching saturation point, and that's what Fukushima nuclear meltdown was, the tipping point. And if you look at the catastrophic, what they call climate change rhetoric, we see this came into play a couple of years after Fukushima, and because it saturated the planet continuous for millions of years with a big pulse of emissions. So it's like an invisible snowstorm that never goes away, and it pulses energy every second. And it brings, when it comes to coal, gas, and oil plants, for instance, you're not going to see protesters like this.
The clashes were violent and widespread. Hundreds of police and anti-nuclear protesters chased each other through the fields and woodland near Vallon. Roadblocks were set up to try to prevent more protesters converging on the area, but at one point a group managed to block a section of the railway line. Fierce protests are expected along the 700-kilometre route to Germany.
Germany sent their fuel to France, to La Hague. They reprocessed it, reclaimed the hot particles, the plutonium, uranium fission products to make more mixed oxide fuel, and then set the remainder back. This is absurdly toxic. It's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So when you see them growing food, this is the ultimate madness. The bags are 1-ton bags of radiation. They're in a evacuated no-go zone growing food for consumption. And it just doesn't make any sense that could happen. Nah, that can't be real. And anybody, any educated, non-educated even, would have that reaction. Now, if that was gas, oil, or coal emissions sitting there in the bags, no one would give a shit. Basically, we couldn't care less. Well, they shouldn't do it, but whatever. But it's nuclear. Nuclear is not a game. And so you got decades and decades and decades of journalists coming out lying to you. That don't even make any sense on its own. Say, well, why would you come out you're not protecting the industry, you're dumbing down the population. There's a difference. It's social engineering. And it's been going on for many, many decades. I covered, in the last 2 weeks, I've done 2 full presentations on the tanks, and they're very easy to find. The tanks were there, put there, all built in 2013, 2014, every one of them. And the idea was that you would stop paying attention. And then they were dumping it into the ocean. They couldn't put it in the tanks. If you fill up the tanks, you can't get close to them. If you fill up one, you can't build another one anywhere on site because there's so much radiation. The whole story is so convoluted, complicated, that's what we're dedicated to. We're dedicated to unraveling the daily nightmare of the nuclear industry. And nobody's ever challenged the nuclear industry. So there's 1,000 public relation firms that are always hundreds of them having to go at you one way or another. And they're in very key positions. They're able to accomplish a lot, right? I had 24,200 subscribers for over 4 years. Never lost one and never gained one. Last year when I was out in the woods reporting on the spiders were missing from the forest, they actually took down my site with no strikes, no warning, no emails, no nothing. Because that was significant, eh? Japan offers $6,000 cash, U.S., and a free house. $6,000 cash also per child. But you get $6,000 in a free house if you get a Dodge, a.k.a. Tokyo. And if you got a kids, you can cash in right there. And there's ongoing bonuses for a few years after. Nuclear power is clean and green. Don't take my word for it. Ask the lobbyists. And everybody's a lobbyist, and particularly a journalist. That's what a journalist now is. You don't write the story in reality. The industry writes the story, gives it to the journalists or the media. The journalist puts their name on it. And they built up an audience from cat videos and everything else. Okay, so I just want to touch back on the tanks one more time before we move into the news cycle, which is 5, 10, 15, 16, 17 or something. A U.S. state hit with extremely large pulses of Fukushima radioactive material. It's 5,500 miles away. Significant amount of plutonium released for months. Well, it never stops. Same as the fuel pools, you never stop, right? But this is excited. This is now curium. This has gone into a meltdown. So it's designated, the biggest byproduct is going to be the curium isotopes. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium-238, for instance. But plutonium was released for months, just for a few hours, just for a millionth of a second in an atomic bomb explosion is really, really bad. So going on for months, divide that into seconds. Radioactivity from the plant measured globally and blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. So have a nice night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Because what else is it? What part about this is confusion to somebody, I wonder? I know the regular people are not confused at all. They're like me. But to those who are magically or bizarrely are on a fence after getting this far into the video, what is it that confuses you about this? Because it's not fairy dust we're talking about. And you're not going to turn into the Hulk or Spider-Man, and it's not in the tanks. It can't be in the tanks and certain measured globally and blanketing the entire northern hemisphere at the same time, right? It can only be one or the other, and unfortunately it's one, not the other. Official back from Fukushima, invisible blanket of death covering everything. It's a nightmare. Heart defects related to Fukushima from the children, but studies came out in 2019 was 14,200 neonates and infants needed open heart surgery out of 100,000 live births in Japan. These are catastrophic numbers. This is, you don't have the open heart surgery, you're dealing with serious congenital malformations. Former World Health Organization expert blasted UN Fukushima report and warns of cancer spikes. It's not in the tanks, it's everywhere. That's why they abandoned these communities, because it's not in the tanks, right? 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 in a Canadian study, that was downplayed, by the way, fell on the U.S. during peak post-Fukushima. This was sustained per liter. And so if you do the mathematical equations, you expect 31 times more iodine-129 compared to the 131, which is unbelievably effective, by the way, at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of all species, not just humans. And so there's a separate study from Ottawa showing 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain, which backs up that study because that's the ratio you would expect it. And you would have, if they had checked that sample, they would have found that in it too, see? But they were only reporting on the 131, and they were only reporting on the 220, or the iodine-129. And so that study was from Ottawa, Canada. And this was sustained, went on for several months. The elevated plumes, and they would have looked something like the one in the bottom right-hand corner, but infinitely worse. Nuclear expert in Japan, plutonium is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's being redeposited in unanticipated locations. It's everywhere, running right into the Pacific. So it's not in the tanks. They didn't run away and leave the precious vehicles and homes and communities and graveyards behind because it's in the tanks. They ran because it's not in the tanks. Rain out of hot particles from radioactive clouds continue for another year, not just in the Pacific Northwest. No, it's the world, the entire planet. It's the entire planet. And each fall brings a new batch of radioactivities bioaccumulating. Every day there's another batch coming out because it's not in the tanks. If it was in the tanks, you couldn't stand up there in your paper suits. Hospital. Fukushima radiation may be eating holes in people's brains. The military brought in to hide the true levels of radiation. Officials are covering up dire consequences. And it's not just cancer. Dead animals litter the California beaches. Graveyards of dead sea life washed up. Influxes of malnourished, emaciated creatures. They're starting to worry. The animals are starving to death, covered in sores, stunted growths, weak immune systems, because it's not in the tanks. Might as well finish that out. Hang on. Because I have done so much work putting documentation together, and I don't really drag it out that often. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, that's the wrong search. I can't remember where I put it. It's been a while since I grabbed it. One more try here. I really shouldn't because we're just starting the news. We've got an absurd amount of news, but we're just going to flow through it. I'll be really happy if I could find... I can't. Oh, luck would have it. I did. Just give me a second. Summer's almost gone. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I can't remember anymore. Unless that's it right there, I suppose. Here we go. So I'm going to show you actual studies. Actual studies of fallout in different countries. The Baltic Sea, Northern Hemisphere studies, global local cancer risk after Fukushima. So why, like, to mention the word global cancer risk because of your power plant breaking down. Saudi Arabia. I'll get on it right quick here. Just waiting for it to finish rendering on my side. Saudi Arabia. Great Britain. Germany. So if you find one of the isotopes like they are, this is what they're acknowledging. Korea, South Korea, Spain. I put little flags and little maps there in some of them for you, in case you're patriotic. Russia, of course. Northwest Romania. Australia. Italy. A little rusty. I remember putting all this together saying, why are you wasting your time doing all of this, Dana? I'm just driven, eh? Driven to tell the story of Fukushima, Vietnam, and British Columbia. What do you want? I'll bring it to you. Taiwan, Monaco, Beijing. I only got 3 or 4 left to go. Athens, Greece, Liberia Peninsula, high altitude European locations, and the last one is southern Poland. But I mean, you know, I can just show you this one here, and it includes all of the studies, and say we got the studies, and I haven't got time. But sometimes I got to make time when I don't even have time. Like Dad used to say, if you want something done, ask somebody who's too busy to do it, and they'll get it done on time for you every time. Levels consistently rise in fall worldwide, circling the globe, and I just showed you many different ways. And so, back to the poll again. Our disease factories, also known as nuclear power plants, and disease factories, also known as nuclear fuel rod pools, doomsday machine. So before we even got, we're going to jump right into the news cycle right now, but we got 42 votes before we got to the news cycle. And you'll see what I mean by the time I get through it. Let's get after it. And so this is going to go pretty quick because there's so much I couldn't keep up with it, so I just screen captured a lot of the stories, headlines, and pertinent single. So this one disappointed me when I got it today. Nuclear Innovation Institute is hoping to educate at the Hockey Day in Canada. So Hockey Day in Canada, what does that imply? It's a single day each year where you dedicate the day to being a sports fan, if that's what you are, to hockey. And nuclear got to stick their mug in there and manipulate you. Think about, this is Canada, of course. Canada is owned by the nuclear industry, not by Britain, but the nuclear industry owns Canada. They've permanently destroyed it already at this stage. I'm not joking. We got the worst country on the planet when it comes to nuclear industry. We got the worst planet when it comes to nuclear industry. Michael is calling in. Show again. Hi, Michael.
I'm here.
Go ahead. You're good. You're live.
You are good. So, first thing I wanted to say was thank you very much for last night. I thought it was a fantastic show.
You're welcome.
You know, when you... Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You stepped in on this guy, Tim, who was saying, I support you, I support you, I support you. And then he said, let's eat tuna fish sandwich.
I lost track of you. I can't quite hear you.
And you were right there. You were right there. And you said, sir, I'm going to stop you right there and say, what you're saying is nonsense. And tuna fish sandwiches are not okay.
That's right, yeah. Unfortunately, right? No, I can understand people making mistakes, right? But it's not safe. That's the bottom line.
And I don't think he was making a mistake. I think he was making some type of company line.
Yeah, it could be. You never know, do you? Well, like tuna is really simple. It's at the top of the food chain. It's a vicious, voracious appetite. And it's a very fast swimmer. It covers long distances at high speed. So it's going to bioaccumulate absurd numbers, right? And I mean, that's incontestable, right? Okay, Mike, anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when some curious observers are alerted to this, we mention Mercury, because Google is a source for them to understand what does that mean.
Right.
And they can get that information from Google, but they can't get it about radioactivity. Only you can give that to them.
Yeah, we can, and we do the whole job. I test Google lots of times for the right answer. It's pretty rare to get it. You'll get whatever the party line from the lobbying groups are. That's the line you're going to get fed. So it's a despicable corporation, obviously, right?
Right.
Which is Alphabet, and they have many, many despicable subsidies. They're tight with the military-industrial complex, United Nations. In fact, they're at the beck and call of United Nations, which is, you're no longer a corporation when you're doing stuff like that, right? Okay, Mike, I got absurd 330 clicks to get through for the news cycle. And we're on the first click right now. Is there anything else before I let you go you want to throw out there?
Yeah, so these females who want to know, are my tuna fish sandwiches safe? Who's really getting the message through to them? Because I think more dudes know than females.
I don't know the ratio. Because it just faded from a lot of people's minds pretty quickly, or it was never there in the first place, right? And that's the Simpsons and Spider-Man and the Hulk, decades of that imprinting, right, has disenfranchised them from being able to consider something, right? And when it comes to that narrative, that's the idea of the brainwashing. They're not doing it because they're bored. The social engineering is really effective, and they do it everywhere. It's symmetrical throughout social medias, throughout Hollywood, throughout the institutions, universities, schools, Boy Scout. Like the Boy Scouts have atomic badges, It's everywhere. It's very, very, very... It is, that's what they call it, the atomic plague, because it can only survive by taking over and consuming everything at some point, and that's what we see with this industry. Okay, my friend, well, I'm going to let you go.
Well, I think that, it's great when the females show up and say,
Yep.
you raised an interesting point, and I would like more information.
Yeah, well, like you say, I'm here 5 days a week. I'm here for everybody.
I celebrate you.
I'm working nonstop, and I got 2 hours to go yet, so don't worry about it. It's all good. And so it was nice to see people showing interest, but, you know, it's not something I'm going to get an answer, right? They're not going to call me up and say, thank you, Dana. And we started up a organization. We're going to go beat the shit out of the nuclear industry, too. That's not going to happen for me. There's no bands playing. You know what I'm saying? There's no bands playing at the end for people. So there's no incentive for a lot of people, right? There's no glory. So most people don't. People like yourself and you know, the regular crowd in particular have been at it for a very long time and very passionate about it. And if you're aware of this and you come across me, I'm going to resonate for sure. But for the average person, I don't, you know, I'm not wrapping shit on a stick, so there's no excitement, there's no drama, there's no, you're an educational program. So unfortunately, what I'm trying to do was target the investors, the policymakers, and their families, and nuclear industry families too, right? I realized that you can't influence journalists because they're a lost cause. They're the problem, right? And you can't influence the universities because they're the problem. And if they weren't the problem, we wouldn't have these issues, right? The only reason that these have snowballed into what they are now is because of the willingness of your universities, your medias, and the industry captured them by proxy, then captures key corporations, key positions, and key government agencies to capture those, because that's who those entities are. They're going to the universities looking for talent, and the talent they're receiving, they go there and say, well, who do you recommend? They're like, oh, well, you know, they're not going to say pro-nuclear, blah, blah, blah. They're going to say blah, blah, blah. But they're not going to point them to somebody that's not pro-nuclear for these key positions, right? And this has been going on for 80 years. And the industry takes care of their own, right? And that there's a big incentive to be stupid and to pretend that, you know, be naive and gullible and pretend that reality is not reality. There is an incentive, and that's what a lot of people know. These jobs exist because their parents were scumbags and their parents were scumbags, and they go to university with the intention to get that job. And there's an absurd amount of these people on our planet that went that particular route. They knew that being a scumbag was a good paying job, and they knew where it was, and all they had to do was get the free education that they got, finish it out, and they got a cushy job for life.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I am going to add, the journalists will report when it's appropriate for them, when they can't say no. The babies have been born with mutation. And when that story hits, then you see action.
Yeah, well, they blame it on climate change, see? That's the problem, right?
Well, jellyfish babies are not caused by climate change.
Oh, no, there's, like you say, this is what they're going to blame it on. That's what they're allowed to say. They don't write the majority of the articles. They're written by the lobbyists. The lobbyists give it to the media. The media puts their name on it and puts it out to their viewers, and that's how they get paid. That's how they make a living. That's how they pay their mortgages. That's how they pay for the dentist for the children. How do you pay for...
when it's jellyfish babies, they have to report it. Say,
oh, yeah, no, I hear you.
This is Ontario, Canada, and you have to accept jellyfish babies at New Year's is the new standard. They have to.
They should go out and deliver the babies in the Bikini Islands or in Christmas Island or places like this where the children... You know what I'm saying?
They can do it here.
You know what I'm saying? Where the children are... Take their vacation. Somebody send them on a vacation to these places, and that'll be a major eye-opener for reality, right?
It's coming here soon.
Oh, it's here now. Yeah, it's here now, big time. It's on, but now it's finally it's taken over.
When little kids are being born with 1 ear.
Well, there's like you say, like if you're looking for mutations, that's a statistic thing. if you look at the 1800 diseases that comes with radiation, then you start seeing it in every family in multiple places. You know what I'm saying?
And the reporters have to report on it. They have to.
Yeah, well, they're not. So, but they
Gun
better.
to their head.
Well, I'm going to cover the reporters for the next 2 hours. We'll see how they done.
All right.
Okay, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye bye.
Good night.
Yeah. Good night. That's Michael Schill from Ontario. And I mean, you know, any victory is a good victory. I'm not going to discourage people from trying to have victories, right? But I don't go that route of trying to convince anybody. I just tell the story. I don't do it in my personal life. I don't do it in supermarkets. And I can too, and I have over the years, but I don't do it anymore. I don't do it to my family or friends because they're too fucking stupid, the majority of them. Not all of them, but the majority of them. To even have a conversation with, let alone explain something to them. Most of them, if you brought out a VCR, still couldn't program the VCR. Let's put it that way. The nuclear industry now has gone after Hockey Day in Canada. The scum of the scum has gone after it. The Nuclear Innovation Institute will be hosting an educational interactive display at Hockey Day in Canada. It's just scum, eh? You can't be left alone anywhere. What? You're not going to be in front of a TV all day? We'll get you wherever you toe. What's next for the anti-NATO left? Anti-NATO was created, by the way. NATO was created because of the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union canceled everybody's pensions and dissolved their obligations worldwide and dissolved their country, NATO should have been dissolved at the same time. NATO is threatening nuclear war. This is with no country. This is just a bunch of countries, militaries, 28 militaries, ready to go to nuclear war against whoever gets in, hurts their feelings. It's absurdness. Nationwide events to mark the second anniversary of the nuclear ban treaty that none of the countries' nuclear weapons signed. But it took 70 years for the other countries to sign the No Nuclear Weapons Treaty. The 17 effects nuclear war would have on Earth barely had any. Just another idiot story about the nuclear industry, no doubt. The Philippines' Batan Bishop opposes nuclear plants. Nuclear power plants. Actually got a head on his shoulder, but it sounds... We don't want to put life on the brink of danger. Well, it's just a nuclear power plant. You're kind of fear-mongering. No. He's actually educated. I speak and stand against the Bata nuclear power plant in the Philippines and oppose the idea or planned continuation of the... Well, it happened at the same time as Chernobyl when the plant was completed in 1986, the same year as Chernobyl happened, and so they decided not to go put fuel into it. But since then, for the last 37 years, the nuclear industry has been vehemently trying to get them to start it up. And now, it's analog throughout the facility. They got to upgrade everything to digital if they did want to do it. Like the whole process is absurdly expensive, no matter what they decide. And even just walking away from it is absurdly expensive. For the revival of the BNPP power plant, people thinks they will save a lot of money from their electricity bill. However, the cost of construction maintenance will be added burden to the already deep national debt, and which will be paid for by the very citizens for generations to come. So you're still going to have to pay electricity bills, but now you got to pay for a disease factory and for millions of years to store it, which you can't because it's hemorrhaging radiation and it's too volatile to store. Aside from the Santo, which means you're going to have to let it hemorrhage into the environment forever from the nuclear fuel pools and storage, which are all vented. The whole story is absurd. How the hell did we even get to this stage? Aside from this, the United Nations led us here, didn't they? Santos warned of the dangers of the potential nuclear meltdown and nuclear waste. Nuclear waste is hemorrhaging into your community 24 hours a day. There's no containment anymore. They tell you, oh no, nuclear power plants got containments, but the fuel pool doesn't. And there's decades of reactor cores splitting the atoms all day long. You can't stop it. And you can't contain it. And you can't filter it, despite their pitiful claims. We do not want to revive the nuclear power plant in the Philippines. We don't want to put life on the brink of danger in the shadow of impending death and in a future with no certainty of goodness, safety, and beauty. We don't want our sea to be uninhabitable to the marine life, resulting in a disruption of our ecosystem. We don't want our soil to be poisoned and no longer viable to be cultivated. And we don't want our livelihoods to be destroyed. Well said, man. Way to go. Thank goodness. Unfortunately, here's the scumbag. Bill Gates, who hasn't built anything in nuclear, he just lent his name to it. And everybody, Bill Gates is going to build a reactor. He's going to put one up everybody's butt. We'll overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius. By what, 10, 12, something? Because of the endless pulsing of energy by all the emissions for 80 years. Bioaccumulation every day from 1,000 fuel pools. And endless dumps. And legacy fuel to still hemorrhaging atoms into the environment. Here's what the microfounder, soft founder thinks about nuclear and fake meat. Yeah, they'll conquer fake meat. I don't need to be Bill Gates to know that. But to promote nuclear, that's how Bill Gates, remember that speech he gave a number of years ago, how do we get rid of the majority of the population? Nuclear. It's a slow kill, but it's a guarantee. But then it takes out all species permanently. Japan's public opposed to dump the radioactive water into the sea. I showed you, there's no radioactive water in those tanks. The tanks are empty. They were built to manipulate you in the wrecked. It violates UN convention. UN. The military-industrial complex. Man arrested on suspicion of terror offences at Heathrow's uranium nuclear scare. So in the United Kingdom, somebody shipped in a couple of pounds of raw uranium. You know, the debate goes back and forth, but apparently it was raw yellow cake, right? 308. And that's still equal to a terrorism. But nuclear meltdowns covering the entire planet in radioactive food, no problem at all. Grown food in a nuclear wasteland alongside of 1-ton bags, perfectly normal. Bring some in on an airplane, you're a terrorist, terrorist. That shouldn't be right there. Must have came out over here. Okay. UAE might give Constipated Party Conference of Parties 28 the breakthrough. So they're going to have it in Saudi Arabia this year, the United Nations Conference of Parties 28. And the guy that's going to be leading it there is the CEO of the oil company there. But he's pro-nuclear. And he's an influential family from United Arab Emirates. We look forward to taking a big shit on these people. He's CEO of Abu Dhabi National Oil Company and has been designated president of Constipated Party 28 and has drawn a barrage of criticism from well-intentional climate change activists. You're no longer a human, you're a climate change activist. They got to label you so they can hate you. The Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation was set up, and in 2009, this is the nuclear plant. It was awarded $25 billion contract to disgusting South Korea for building a very big nuclear disease factory. And then it's calling it producing clean nuclear energy. So when they frame that narrative that way, you can imagine what they're going to be doing this year at Constipated Party 28. The first net zero urban settlement before the term net zero had entered our lexicon. Well, actually, that's true, right? Because United Nations published or pumped out Miles Allen's study talking about net zero, which was a stupid paper that should never got any traction. The same as carbon free, the same as climate change. It should never got any traction. Right? There's a cause for climate change. It's called 80 years of nuclear emissions. But they want to blame it on something that's harmless and makes food and plants grow. TVA floors the Clean Power Accelerator. TVA, what's the deal with hydrogen? Because hydrogen, now they're also talking about nuclear, right? But hydrogen is serious potential, right? Unfortunately, one of its problems was storage, and another problem that they're solving was producing it is very intensive, a lot of energy, right? So it's perfect for renewables to make hydrogen with. It's a perfect solution. And you can use geothermal. But if you use geothermal, you can't take it everywhere. You can't put it in your truck and drive it around, right? So geothermal and hydrogen are two super, super important, incredibly important technologies that needs to be streamlined so you can pick it up at the Walmart and wherever. The U.S. Department of Energy is a big enough deal that is planning to fund regional hydrogen hubs across the country with $8 billion from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. $8 billion in hydrogen coming for America. About time, isn't it? Which is nothing. They throw that away on fusion for breakfast. International deal paves the way for Goodfellows scientific industry expansion. Goodfellows industry, as probably not a coincidence that movie Goodfellows existed, because Goodfellas is the farthest thing from being Goodfellas in this corporation. Delivers material to the nuclear legacy Lawrence Livermore Disease Factory Laboratory for the nuclear fusion breakthrough that shook the world. No, this was about weapons. It's got nothing to do with power, despite the propaganda that was proliferated December the 13th onwards, right? Look at all the little scumbags. They got a 150,000 catalog, 150,000 items for the industry to make it even more insidious. The Pentagon's National Defense Strategy drives record military spending. Stupid looking Pentagon. The baseline defense budget now sits at $858 billion. There's no money left over for anything in the country under the military and nuclear. Cost of the 20-year war on terror was $8 trillion. $8 trillion for a false flag on top of that. For a staged event. They made $8 trillion off it. So it's worth their time, right? To blow up a few skyscrapers and crash a few planes in fields. And by the way, we didn't find the planes in any of the fields. Large Hadron Collider physicist objects to co-authorship with Russia. So what? There's several thousand physicists working there and another couple of thousand engineers. Just because one of them got an issue, do you think they're going to stop? They can't even do it with Russia. Russia just shipped a whole bunch of equipment to them for free. Now they got the equipment, they're like, we don't want nothing to do with you anymore. The 4 largest experiments carried out involved thousands of scientists and engineers. It's around 5,000 a day, making huge amounts of money, and they don't have to do anything. They just got to go there and stand up like idiots each day. In other words, you don't have to solve any riddles. Do you think those 5,000 scientists and engineers figured out how to do geothermal everywhere? Guess again. Do you think they come up with practical solutions for the planet? Think again. Do you think they're coming up with solutions that'll or stuff that'll end up destroying the planet? You can guarantee it. They have no redeeming qualities. Japanese Foreign Minister Shit for Brains visits Ottawa to discuss economic trade. No, Canada's a great friend. Look at the radioactive follower. Canada's a great friend of the scumbag Japan. If it wasn't for Canada, Japan couldn't have shipped this food anywhere for a decade. Everybody in Canada had to get sick. So Justin Trudeau, the degenerate monster, can pretend he has some human into him. South Korea bets big on nuke-tart energy at the expense of renewables. Yeah, they cut back on renewables to get more nuclear. But see, the next administration is coming in 2 years' time, right? They'll probably walk away from this like the last administration had done. That's what they've been doing for a couple of decades. One administration pro-nuclear, the next one's not. Next one, let's get rid of it all, close it all down. The next one shows up, well, no, let's get it back up and running. And in order for nuclear to work in South Korea, they got to rob the country. They got to rob the hospitals. They got to rob the schools. They got to rob the infrastructure. That's the only way they can make it work. It's stupid. Well, it's nuclear, Dana. They've had accidents in North Korea. They just got one reactor back online. South Korea, we got one reactor back online. It was damaged in an earthquake. It took 5 years to get it back online after an earthquake. When you got an earthquake that damages that much, you shouldn't be reopening it. You really think you're not going to get another earthquake? The energy minister called on scumbag Trudeau in Canada to bolster energy security with Japan. Well, they're trying to sell gas from Alberta to the Japanese. The Japanese are happy to buy it. The media is just, right, it has to come out and sell you the story. That's the only thing that's important, is if the corporation does that for Japan, when you have serious, important issues that'll never be addressed. The world needs more disease factories. And why the World Bank needs to get in the game. So this is desperation, most of what we're seeing for nuclear industry, right? It's pure desperation. Any serious efforts to grapple with climate change. So again, right, the word climate change and nuclear power as the solution is an agenda. You got a headache? Well, you need more nuclear power plants. You're late for getting work today? Well, that's because you don't have more nuclear power plants. The kids are taught the same thing in school. And there's no logic, but that's what they're taught. Transitioning to so-called net zero, which is Miles Allen's paper. I said it too many times now. I got to probably bring it up, do I? Self-punishment. And the big problem is I got so much to get through. Well, it's not there where it's supposed to be. Oh my God, it's not where it's supposed to be. What the hell is that all about? That can't be real. Oh well, let's keep going. If it's not there where it's supposed to be, then one more try, I suppose. But no, I don't see it. It's not where it's supposed to be. I'll have to fix that after the show so it doesn't happen to me next time. That was awkward. It's not where it's supposed to be. Anyway, I don't see it. Let's keep going. I was going to bring up the Miles Allen study. Dresden, Canada mayor okayed with no commitment nuclear waste management organization free money, free millions of dollars. So there was a story we covered last week where Dresden, Ontario, the nuclear industry is like you know, we're not trying to bribe you, but we want to give you a couple of $1 million to help you in your community. And that don't mean we want you to vote yes for our disease factory we set up in your area. We just want to give you money because we're the nuclear waste management organization. We got tons of it. Might as well give some away to people that, you know, we like. We're not trying to influence you. We're just going to give you a bunch of money. And the mayor is like, well, he's okay with a couple of $1 million. As long as there's no commitment. What's that? You're going to give us another couple of million soon too? Well, that's okay, but you're not buying my vote. But when is the check going to be here? They're doing that all over the place. Deep Borehole Demonstration Center announced with launch of Executive Director. Deep Borehole Center. They're just going to drill holes and throw nuclear down there and fill it in and shut up. Well, you can't retrieve it if you come up with a solution. That's tough luck. Get lost, drop dead. We're the nuclear industry. We can't come up with a solution, so let's put it in the hole in the ground and move on. The company was founded as a non-profit organization. That's the scariest thing you want to hear, by the way. And the board of directors, the inaugural members, are from the National Radiation Protection Institute. Honey, is that a fox in the yard? Gee, I think so. Well, you better go out and open up the chicken hen hatch so you don't hurt the fence. Kimba residents measure no high-level nuclear waste. Reassured, Kimba, which is in Australia, a little farmland, of course. Prime farmland, by the way. When there's a million other places they could put it. There's probably way better. No, well, there's this little section there got farms. We're not very happy with that. They grow food, for God's sakes. We should put a nuclear waste dump right there. That makes sense. So the waste is medical waste. It's so radioactive, they got to put it in a deep geological repository, but there's no high levels going to be there. But if there's no high levels, why are you putting it into a deep geological repository? And why do everybody die from it? Which is why you're going to... Like, the patients in the hospitals have $1 million room. And that's meant to stop you from irradiating anybody in the hallway. It's lined with lead. And it has a separate sewage system, so that can be collected and put in a deep geological repository because your excrement is very harmful to everything alive. Not you. Not you, but everybody else. We can put it in there. It'll cure you. By the way, no two radiation treatments are the same. They're like terracotta soldiers, right? They're never the same. You got to put it in deep geological repository after they made you safe, right? It's like Japan. We covered the last show of last week. We got to increase the radiation levels, 1,000-fold, so everybody can be safe. Otherwise, we got to move them out of there. Because it won't be safe if we don't increase the level. If we increase the level, then they're going to be safe. So it was harmful at 5 becquerels a kilogram, but we had an accident. Now it's 1,000. So we got to increase it many times. That way you're going to be safe. And you don't got to move. It's brilliant, right? So there's no incentive not to be evil. And guess what you ended up with? Should a new and experimental reactor here in Canada deserve a federal impact assessment? Of course it should. These are new and experimental reactors. Like, look up the word new and look up the word experimental and then look up the word reactor. And you're not going to have a human environmental impact study done because the nuclear industry controls Canada and said no. What do we do with all the stuff that's glowing waste, with all that glowing nuclear waste? Nuclear, that's the real Green New Deal. No pun intended. Clean, safe, disease factories everywhere is envisioned to carry the energy load, and small modular reactors that don't exist, at least 15 to 20 to 25 years away from fruition. They've been at this for 50 years. You really think they're going to just pop one out in the morning? Give your head a shake. Our little nuclear plants, built like automobiles, in a factory no less, and delivered in shipping containers anywhere, Dana. Again, the Rolls-Royce reactor, small modular reactors, is almost 500 megawatts. It's the size of half of a massive reactor. The only thing you're putting in a shipping container is 1 million different pieces. Bill Gates is testing one in Wyoming. No, Bill Gates, where he's set up, he's not there. The company that he's got his name attached to, that's a coal plant. It doesn't shut down for another couple of years. They don't even have a design into the non-regulatory agencies. So to say that he's testing one in Wyoming is not an exaggeration, it's a fucking lie. That NuScale is testing in Idaho is another lie. NuScale has some of the application in, but not all of it, and that's the only one on the planet with an application. They got a rubber stamp, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It's incomplete. It's 1 million pieces of paper, and it's probably missing 1 million pieces. They're going to be generating nuclear waste, energy 2 years after the order is placed, which is a real strange statement. They could be generating nuclear waste. You know what the scientists call nuclear reactors? Fuel production machines. Fuel production machines, whatever the frig that means. Because the fuel is used for weapons, right? In order to make the fuel, you need the reactor. The energy is a byproduct of making the fuel. It's about the fuel. If you don't understand that, go look up La Hague sometimes, or Donneray, or Windscale, or Sellafield someday, or Mayak. Maybe then you'll wrap your mind around it. These are absurd weapons production facilities, and they need nuclear fuel to do it. Today, there are more than 80,000 metric tons of high-level nuclear waste in America. Well, America has Hanford. Hanford, in the 50s, had dumped 450 billion gallons, 1.8 trillion liters directly into the soil of high-level nuclear waste. It's equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, wrapped around the entire planet, and 520 feet high. So imagine a 520-foot wall, 6 feet wide, wrapped around the entire planet. And that a liter of it will kill everybody in McDonald's every 20 minutes forever, long past the human experience. And every species on the planet that they can get to walk into McDonald's forever. A liter of it. A wall 520 feet high. Most of it's sitting in pools. Sitting in pools, splitting the atoms, boiling off the water, hemorrhaging into the environment, surrounded by farms. Elena Reynolds got a cushy little scumbag job at the Bulletin of Unconcerned Scientists. What a degenerate the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists turned out to be. What a betrayal they are. Imagine what kind of monster she actually is to get that job. Japan offers $6,000 cash and a free house. I covered that earlier. I didn't throw it all up there, I guess. The tanks are empty. I explained all that last night and again last week in 2 separate. I also have a playlist with 5 or 6 presentations on the same subject. I actually know what I'm talking about, unfortunately, and none of it's good. Fukushima plant will burn radioactive waste. They got 2 incinerators. They built another one there. All nuclear plants got incinerators. They're legally allowed to incinerate radiation each day. They also all got pipes directly into the ocean where they hemorrhage radiation all the time. They're allowed to do it because nobody's allowed to have a conversation. And now we don't got a planet no more. The incinerator's running around the clock. 14 tons of nuclear waste today. They also got a high temperature incinerator on site at Fukushima Daiichi across from the incinerator workshop. Incinerator workshop at a nuclear meltdown site. These are not good combinations, no matter how you try to paint that one. You're not going to come out with a very pretty picture. The site was ripped apart. The ocean is vicious, isn't it? 600 kilometers an hour. Japan burning Fukushima debris 10 miles from the Daiichi plant. Burning it. No checks and balances. It's 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. That's a dirty bomb per kilogram. You got 1 billion pounds of it. It's not in tanks. They're incinerating it. We're basically recreating Fukushima over and over and over and over forever and ever and ever. Clouds of radiation continue across to the Pacific Northwest. That make you feel all warm inside. Make you want to gush. I love nuclear so much. It's so wonderful. Clouds of it covering the planet all the time. This is a plutonium-239 from Fukushima fallout, by the way. All of these are authentic. It's not in your tanks. 300 times more radiation released into the atmosphere from burning radiation than claimed by the government on top of that. Is the government trying to contaminate the entire country by burning the dirty bombs everywhere? Japan professor arrested for protesting the burning of dirty bombs everywhere. Because it's not in your tanks, see? Radioactive fallout from Fukushima being hidden. Very odd. Really? You think that's odd? That's diny that people claim is Fukushima for some reason. Hundreds ill after Fukushima nuclear plant rubble burned in a major city. Well, that's permanent. The rest will get sick later. It's not in the tanks. It's everywhere. The tanks were built to manipulate you. A genetic passport for major population exposed to radiation. I'm pretty sure that qualifies as a doomsday machine. Pinch me if I'm wrong, but I think that qualifies as a doomsday machine. Radiation precautions for areas like Seattle, Vancouver, Portland. Perhaps you need to wash your shoes. Like if you need to wash your shoes, you need to throw away your shoes and your car and your playgrounds and your sidewalks. It's not in your tanks. The tanks were built to manipulate you. Same as the paper suits. 230,000 becquerels per square meter on an athlete's field, Tokyo, because it's not in the tanks, right? 6 in 10 Fukushima tested have diabetes, and they're expecting diabetes from the children at Fukushima, from the radiation. And you can expect diabetes and Down syndrome and everything else from farms that are built in proximity to disease factories. Officials admit a deadly Fukushima cover-up. We lied. There is nothing in the tanks. Enormous spread of radiation because it's not in the tanks. Back to the news cycle. I just wanted to throw that in there tonight because we didn't get to it last night. And I feel guilty when I don't cover all the work that I do. I don't mean I win the battle, but I feel guilty. Coastal residents fear hideous seawall in Florida? Hang on. Too late. Gone cold. Too busy working. Not enough time drinking tea. Oh, that's Miami. To protect her from the radioactive fallout that caused climate change. World's ocean broke the heat records again in 2022. This is, you see this, if you look at the escalation of severe weather, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, forest fires, the hottest temperatures in history, they're all post-Fukushima, not pre-Fukushima. The heavy rhetoric about climate change is post-Fukushima. The mass die-offs of the emaciated birds and mammals and animals and whales is post-Fukushima. Warmer ocean temperatures tied to heat waves, droughts, hurricanes, and extreme weathers. We've been covering that for years. Move over in mice and caterpillar could replace mammals for the obvious reason. They're going, you can't get them anymore. Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, Raymond Gilmedy, they have crews going out and stealing beagle dogs and beagle puppies, but now they're going to use hamsters and rats and butterflies. Thanks to Canada's broken access to information system, we have to look abroad to understand our own history. Yeah, Canada's secrecy is, Canada doesn't redact or release anything. Most countries got a 20, 30-year cycle where it gets released into the public records. Canada doesn't. Canada's been taken over by the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry's crimes are so pervasive you can't escape them. NuScale's cost, this is Alpha, the uranium stock degenerate scumbags, right? And they got you got to be subscribed to read through it. But what they're talking about is NuScale's cost. It's the so-called small modular reactors. They've been open for 18 years, right? They have created no small reactors. They barely got a license into the regulatory agency. And you're looking at 15, 20 more years before they could bring something to fruition. Not only that, they don't have the supply network. They don't have the fuel. Russia was their fuel source. And you're talking about highly enriched uranium, weapons grade uranium that are going to actually, it's the only thing that can make the small disease factories work. They produced 35 times more intermediate dangerous level waste, 35 times more. 30 times more very, very high level waste, and 5 times more fuel rods because they're so inefficient, right? There's no economy of scales involved in it. This is why they didn't originally do that in the industry as small reactors, because they needed the big reactors to make $1. 74% it's a total fable, and it's stopping us from coming up with solutions like geothermal and hydrogen and storage like compressed air storage and water batteries and salt where you can store energy in heat. Here's a poll from Canada, from ground zero of nuclear scumbags in Canada, Saskatchewan. And they magically got 74% of Saskatchewan residents are comfortable with nuclear disease factories. And, he put his picture up there with a smile, but he's probably never smiled after. These people don't smile. And look at the design of their fabled reactor, which they don't have any licenses. They don't have anything to regulatory agencies on top of that. You can do all the polls you want, but you don't actually have a model, morons. It's like a half an ice cream pail turned upside down with a hole cut into it. It sounds about right for the nuclear industry. Moron. A new poll shows massive support for nuclear power, but the small modular reactors that they're promoting, saying that doesn't release greenhouse gas. The greenhouse gas is nuclear. That is greenhouse gas. You can't have insects and birds and mammals and plants and trees and everything else without carbon. No fish, no biota, no biosphere. You can't have an ecosystem without carbon. Carbon is you can't have humans without carbon. Without carbon, there's nothing left on the planet. It's just like the moon, but you got gravity. We can set a model for the world of sort of using small modular reactors support. So now they're saying they can be the leader in small modular reactors. Well, that's a really interesting statement because they don't even have a design in. They're 20, 25 years away. So saying that they're going to be the Renaissance means there's never come to fruition, which is, I'm pretty sure it's not, right? We've covered this a lot over the years, and we're able to say with confidence that this is a distraction. It's meant to stop you from coming up with solutions. You're putting all your eggs into one basket, and you're doing memorandums of understanding to make sure that even if new technology shows up, they can't use it because they're locked in a deal with the devil. Nuclear waste projects in Mexico opposed in recent poll, which is really interesting. You see nuclear waste is opposed everywhere. Nuclear plants are opposed everywhere. But Saskatchewan magically loves something that don't exist. So they had a poll there that was very upset that they were going to put nuclear waste, and this proper thing to be. Why do you move it to a place where there's no reactors? Why punish them? Clingy atoms and catastrophic iron. The strange science underpinning nuclear fusion. Well, see, the sun, it's a million times bigger than Earth. And so, that's why fusion works. They're trying to put it in a bottle after 50 years. Has proven in 50 years that it's a stupid... if you took all the 50 years energy and monetary and academics and scientists and engineers and come up with solutions for geothermal and hydrogen, we wouldn't be having a conversation, would we? And at some point, that's what you're going to have to do. Department of Energy helicopters test Glendale radiation ahead of the Super Bowls each year. Each year on Super Bowl, this will show up in the media. Over the next couple of days, this will show up basically everywhere. And they have these helicopters that'll fly out and do baseline readings, just in case the terrorist releases radiation. This is about brainwashing from the nuclear industry because it's on TV worldwide, and they'll be talking about how they check for radiation to make sure terrorists don't get everybody at the football game. But they're not using it to look for Fukushima, right? Flying 80 kilometers an hour, 150 feet above the ground, getting a baseline reading, but they can't find anything from Fukushima despite all the studies. That's all they found was Fukushima. A new jet-powered hoverboard, not going to be released to the public or nothing, can fly 2 miles high at 110 miles per hour. I don't think going 110 miles per hour, it can, but they're not going to, obviously. So now that they cracked that, where does that technology now is going to get prolific, right? Because he's got a history of all kinds of stuff. He's well known, which means they cracked the code, right? We touched on this last night. We'll do the same thing tonight. Should we eat atom bombs? There was a good headline out of the United Kingdom 2 years ago. Was it better to buy everybody in the United Kingdom an ostrich than it was to build more nuclear weapons? Made more sense. And it doesn't make any sense at all. But it makes more sense than building more nuclear bombs. Don't you just love reality? Did aliens detonate the first nuclear bomb at Trinity Test Site and have children with all the nuclear scientists and the inbreeding is what we currently have right now? That's possible. That's actually possible. That's scary how possible that actually is. The second part, right? Nothing surprises me when it comes to nuclear. Nothing surprises me. There's nothing you can say that's so evil it's hard to believe when it comes to nuclear. There's nothing. Because I give you examples that will leave you sleepless for days of what the nuclear industry has done. Like 800 pregnant women were fed plutonium. They told them it was vitamin drinks and vitamin juice. No, you and the baby were just fine. Drink it all up. And so they followed the unborn child when the child was born, if they survived it. If they didn't, when the child was buried, and they all were, the nuclear industry, from the major laboratories in the United States, after the family went home, dug up the child, stole the body, took it to the national laboratories in the United States, and incinerated the babies to sniff the air for radiation. There's so much of that. It's just the plutonium files. There you go. Go read that sometime. If you haven't got problem with bowel movement, go read that. You'll be crapping like nothing. Nuclear cemeteries are shelters where radioactive waste is stored. Yeah, and it's all vented. It's hemorrhaging radiation into your environment 24 hours a day. The only nuclear cemetery in Spain. Nuclear cemetery. Which gives you the idea that it stays there, right? No, everything is vented into the environment. I'm surprised it's not surrounded by farms. I'm shocked. They probably got fired, whoever designed that spot. Nuclear Energy Institute at Hockey Day in Canada. Being evil is not a job, it's a duty. Man arrested on suspicion of terror offences from Heathrow uranium nuclear scare. They probably planted it there themselves, reality, right? The government. They had an absurd history of attacking themselves and blaming it on somebody they want to have a war with. Patrick Clausen does it quite eloquently. It's hard to beat Patrick. What I done was I put pictures in there to really tell the story. I'll probably never find. Why can't I find that? Why doesn't my brain work? Oh, there he bees. This is Patrick Clausen. He's at the Washington Institute. It's a military-industrial think tank. They're trying to figure out how do we get to war if the current president, it looks like the current president can't get us to war. How do we get to war? And how do we get to all the other wars? Patrick makes it stupid simple. I'll adjust the volume on the fly.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
It would be best if somebody else starts the war. I see Kagan made it over to my site. He come out and took a shit a couple of days ago on the nuclear industry. He does a real cool graphics on his channels, but he took a shit on the nuclear. I went into, I've rarely comment, you know that about me, and I just said, I like that guy, and I'm going to comment on his video and mention the nuclear tanks to him. And you come across, there's somebody that if you come across the information, right? It helps people appreciate reality. Just like this video right here, right? You got Patrick Clausen telling you how every war was a staged event, a false flag staged by the government to get him in a war with another country. Do it one more time.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
And if you ever watched the whole video, he said, the submarine could sink. Who knows, right? And, yeah, I see Kagan Looking Glass. And his video's spot on, man. You nailed it. You don't see it that often, right? And so I was like, oh, well, he deserves a comment. I don't like commenting because I'm working so much, right? And so usually I listen to the videos in the background, but his graphics were so good. I really liked it. Heathrow nuclear shipment, again, right? That story, undeclared material discovered on a passenger flight. And it's not a stretch to imagine the government done that, right? Because when I done this video here, I dug up all the pictures and stories as he was talking, and I was like, less than 1 minute long, and it tells the story of all the wars, and it ain't the story to tell you in school. It's scary, isn't it? How did negotiations to persuade Ukraine to give up the Soviet nuclear weapons on its soil succeeded? Well, just a few people made a lot of money to sell it to the country. They wouldn't, like, if Ukraine did have nuclear weapons, Russia invaded, Ukraine's not going to use them. At best, Ukraine had a dysfunctional military. What they did have was NATO. NATO has been, what do you call it? There's a word for it. NATO's been grooming Ukraine for many decades. And Ukraine is the biggest producer of wheat on the planet. Ukraine is full of orphanages from Chernobyl, disfigured children. Ukraine is and we've covered thousands of studies on Ukraine, academic studies, and Ukraine is the very last spot in that part of the world, that you want to be getting food from, and they're shipping it. They're the biggest producer of wheat worldwide, and it's a complete radioactive wasteland. They closed 9,400 farms in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Scotland. 9,400 farms. 400 are still closed today. They should never open up the other 9,000. And Ukraine is full of biolabs, that's right. In fact, they admitted that after almost 6 months of denying it. They finally admitted it. So why would you put biolabs over in Ukraine, my goodness, and not expect Russia? Well, it was on purpose. Vladimir Putin, Justin Trudeau, Angela Merkel, many of the current past prime ministers, leaders, and elected high-placed officials were part of the World Economic Forum, young global leaders. Vladimir Putin, Justin Trudeau, Angela Merkel, just to name a few. And now they're in positions of authority and leaders. They're older global leaders with Klaus Schwab's. Half the Canadian Parliament admitted to going to the World Economic Forum. What does that tell us? Which is illegal, right, for our leaders to go and to conspire at these places. Right shoddy nuclear waste stories cite to cost Japan 36 billion yen. This story is their failed reprocessing facility. That's 28 years. The new one is 28 years behind schedule, right? So the waste in the storage, most of the waste is in the storage pools at Tokai reprocessing plant. And these are absurd disease factory, folks. These are ridiculous disease factories. It's around 800 containers of transuranic radioactive waste were dropped into the pool from 1977 to 1991. And they emit high levels of radiation. They're still splitting the atoms. The pools are boiling off 120,000 liters a day, 120 tons a day. 121-ton pickup trucks of radioactive fluids evaporated into the environment each day from a reprocessing facility. So when you take the uranium, put it into the chain reaction, it's 2 billion times more toxic, the emissions, the atoms, the isotopes are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poisons. But when you take it, reprocess it, and put it through a chain reaction again, it's 2 billion times 2 billion more toxic. And its longevity will wipe out all the species. So when I put a poll there tonight, which is... The poll tonight is... Are nuclear power plants, nuclear fuel rod pools, doomsday machine? That's what they actually are. They're actually doomsday machines. And I quantified that at the beginning of it. Where the hell did the other Dana come from? Get out of here, you bum. And there's the big disease factory right there. Dark matter still eludes scientists. Let me change that out, actually. I want to put in... My brain has gone dead on me, by the way. Not this one. What is this one? Oh, yeah. The wrinkly page. That's kind of fun. Hang on. I can't remember where the hell is 2. That's not good. One more time, and bear with me. Technical difficulties. Is this it here? No. Okay. Last try. I'll get it. And that page turn is not this. I can't. Oh, there it is. I forgot where it was 2, eh? There you go. I like it. Let's keep it rolling. Rolling. We're getting there. We're actually getting there. Look at this. They're talking about sterile neutrinos. They're talking about dark matter, antimatter. They're trying to quantify it. They're talking about hypothetical particles. And they got thousands of scientists trying to figure out if this hypothetical particle, anti-neutrino, a sterile neutrino actually exists. And so they can solve geothermal, they can solve all kinds of issues. They can come up with solutions for nuclear waste. No. And we got so many of these weaponized organizations, and they chew up the talent that's coming out of the institutions, so they don't come up with solutions for the practical world. They get sucked into these black holes where if they do resolve the question ultimately, it's weaponized against society and the 8 million species. North Korea accuses UN chief of typical double standards. Well, North Korea, if you look up what's the first war the United Nations waged, it was in the 50s against North Korea. Before that, they were called the League of Nations, right? And then they changed their names to United Nations after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, celebrating the incineration and atomizing and aerosoling and ionizing of the atoms of the people. And so they burnt down every community. They fired more ammunition than the Second World War total, United Nations. And then they ostracized with land, sea, air embargoes against North Korea. But they burnt down every community with napalm on top of that. Every single community. And that's collective punishment, right? And they've been using them now as a boogeyman for 70 years. But North Korea hasn't attacked anybody for 70 years. For 50 years before that, they were slavery to Japan. And Japan's legacy is nothing short of hideous. It's hideous. They made a mistake. They should have kept dropping nuclear weapons on Japan until it disappeared. Their legacy warranted it. A nuclear reactor in Sicily. That guy actually scares me. I'm not going to go into the story tonight, but there's so much evil on this planet. Particularly the media. Wow. Particularly universities, like holy. They've been captured by the nuclear industry a very long time ago. And over increments over decades, the capture was complete. Nebraska Public, and the worst thing about capturing all the universities, they supply all the governments, all the businesses, all the industries, all the regulatory agencies comes from the universities, right, to get an education. And so only the Manchurian graduates are put in the key positions. So the nuclear industry is dysfunctional for humanity. It's perfect for a genocide machine, but it's dysfunctional for reality to do anything good. It's incapable. It's bred out of them, right? They don't have those genes in them. Nebraska Public Power District study sites for new nuclear plant in Nebraska. Workers move spent fuel. Again, that's a very small cast that they're using, but all the casts are vented, right? Study will be funded by $1 million in federal dollars, aka taxpayers. Doesn't matter if it's federal or provincial or state, it's still taxpayers' money, right? Small modular reactors, new type of nuclear reactor consideration for around the world, but that's all it is, consideration. You don't have a nuclear renaissance, you have a unicorn. Right, that's what a small modular reactor is. It's the same as a unicorn. In fact, you got better chances of finding a unicorn than a small modular reactor. But that's used to bludgeon you into not coming up with solutions. Nuclear convoys, 40 safety reports in 3 years for United Kingdom. And the checks and some of the independent watchdogs, I got Freedom of Information after suing them multiple times. You had to sue them to get the Freedom of Information. You had to sue them. They wouldn't release it. Accident after accident, crashes, releases. A legacy of stupid, which is what you expect, right, from the nuclear industry. And they're not going to be smart people because they won't work in the industry, just sociopaths and psychopaths. Shameful for a nuclear power to beg Pakistan Prime Minister. No, like Pakistan people are forced to eat nuclear bombs because the government spends all the money on nuclear weapons and nuclear power plants, which are to make nuclear weapons. North Korea nuclear tests inevitable, but that's because you locked them down for over 70 years after you destroyed them. Every building in every community. Millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. So you can have a boogeyman for the rest of your life. And there's people out there terrified of North Korea. Or whichever the latest, greatest boogeyman is. But North Korea is always there when you run out of a boogeyman, see? Trump suggested dropping a nuclear bomb in North Korea and blaming it on someone else, which was I showed you earlier, right? How that works. That's normal, though. Every country does this. They can't get their own way. They attack you and blame it on the latest, greatest terrorist group that they can conjure up. Right? The Mujahideen was 10,000. The Taliban was 10,000. ISIS was 10,000. Hamas is 10,000. Boko Haram, 10,000. Quite the interesting number, 10,000. And for 10,000, they bombed and destroyed country after country after country. And to get that 10,000, right? Millions dead, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, millions missing, millions of refugees. And to get the 10,000 bad guys. They fired, in Afghanistan and Iraq, they fired 5.5 million rounds of small ammunition a month for 9 years to get 10,000 Taliban. It was Mujahideen. They morphed when they were finally expended. There was only 100 left. They grew into the Taliban until there was 10,000 of them. After a decade, there was 100 of them. They turned into ISIS, and they destroyed Syria and Libya. And after that, there was 100 left. They turned into the Boko Haram. And in between all that was 10,000 Hamas, which means you got 5.5 million refugees from Israel, but you can't get any of the Hamas, the 10,000 Hamas. Senior military leader concerned by Canada's staged, right, is what I'm saying to you. Senior military leader who the solution to everything with him is a hammer or a bomb. Senior military leader concerned by Canada's absence from American, British, Australia security pact. U.S. got into Australia and immediately female children went missing all over Australia, and sex brothels opened up within a couple of miles of the bases. Quite a coincidence. Absent from American, British security pact. So what? He said, well, we're worried we won't have access to the technology. But like he said, like, you got to appreciate what I do for a living. Yeah, you kill and rape shit. That's what your men do. That's what you tell them to do. You encourage them to. That's how you create the resistance. You can't have resistance if you don't rape all the young girls and the women and the wives and the grandmothers. That's how you create resistance. And they've done it everywhere. I'll give them credit, though. I'll give them credit. Canada's got three submarines. They're all at the West Edmonton Mall. You can pay a couple of bucks and go down and sit on them. Safety review not done yet for Japan's planned releases contaminated water into the sea. Well, this is South Korea. South Korea got nuclear scientists, nuclear universities. They know the difference. They've absolutely unequivocally watched these programs. If you're in the nuclear industry, you're going to have to watch these programs. You can't avoid it. There's no competition out there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because if there was competition, it's going to be the industry, right? There is competition, but it's the pro industry, right? Nobody's actually done a program, an educational program, that told the truth. And I've got the shit kicked out of me. I've been shot at, attacked, vilified, demonized, smeared, hated upon for years and years and years. But I'm not a bad person. I'm not going away. Yoon kicked off, which is South Korea, United Arab Emirates visit to promote disease factories and, arms export. So how can you have a future when you're proliferating disease factories and weapons? How does that work, I wonder? Martin J. Sherwin's Gambling with Armageddon, he died shortly after that book. I never read the book myself, and I don't think this guy did either, but it's there in case somebody does want to read it. United Arab Emirates, the degenerate, it should be, United Arab Emirates launches 11 environmentally friendly energy projects. 11 environmentally, one of them's nuclear. The Barakan nuclear power plant in the United Arab Emirates is a pioneering energy project, is playing a critical role in the country's transition to cleaner energy. Again, this is nonsense. Significant impact in the fight against climate change by utilizing disease factories. These are pictures from Fukushima today. or yesterday, I'm not sure. Maybe it was last night, actually. Look at all the holes cut in the reactor 1 to your left. And we've been speculating on that since just recently, right? Organic Slant asked me, did I have any input on why the building was full of holes? And I was like, what are you talking about? I went over and had a look, and I was, oh shit, what are they up to? And they haven't acknowledged that yet, right? That's new. They took the Kevlar sarcophagus off it after 5 years and dismantled the rest of it recently. They're claiming they're going to get the fuel out of that in reactor 2, but the evidence that we gathered up and the headlines is unequivocal that there is nothing left inside the buildings. There's remnants, obviously, but the building burnt continuously for days. The temperatures that's a typical sneeze. It comes in twos. Lately, I've only been doing one, so I'm a little bit worried. High Court's TEPCO Fukushima ruling could be bellwether for other cases. So remember a couple of years ago, these were 3 executives from Fukushima who were from TEPCO, were put on trial and were immediately was thrown out, right? Or was that the ones that were convicted and had to pay $70 billion or something like that? And they don't have $500 million between them. They might, but they probably don't. So they were the fall guys, right? Okay, so I already went through, this was one of the pictures, and I was looking at all these spots. You know, here's what reactor 4 to your left looks like. To the right is what they say it looks like. Now, I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Whatever it is they're doing is going to be no good. Interview Japan's unilateral radioactive wastewater. First off, you can't filter the wastewater because now you can't get near the filter again. You can only use one filter and then you got to run away and never go back. You can't step over the hoses. That's a lethal dose. The whole story is insane. Japan's Soma fully restored quake-hit coal fire plant. So January the 16th of last year, or March the 16th, 5 days after the 11th anniversary, they had a brutal earthquake that caused over $5 billion worth of damage. It was 60 kilometers off Fukushima. It cracked open 5,000 schools. It tore the train tracks apart in 1,000 places. It shook buildings 250 kilometers away in Tokyo for 30 seconds straight. But ground zero, where the fragile reactors are to, it caused absolutely no problem whatsoever. So they gutted the building with remote control cranes and homeless. They didn't clean up the debris around it, by the way. And they built this contraption off-site, brought it in. The panels are hanging there by gravity. And then this is 2013, then they pretended that they're inside the building that don't even exist, and they got the fuel out of the pool. And the fuel obviously doesn't exist because the pools are at the top of the building. But what it does show is this worrying trend of them willing to cut your throat for a paycheck. China urges Japan to safely dispose of nuclear contaminated water. Again, we covered that extensively last night. Extensive is the key word here, right? Wigner hoses. That's a great one, James. Thank you. Yeah, Wigner hose. They'll give you the Wigner. Boris Johnson lines up top lawyer for lockdown party inquiry. I'm sure I can find Boris drinking the canned juice a couple of years ago. He should be arrested for what he done. And I'm sure in the future he probably will be. What he done was he removed all restrictions 2.5 years ago for baby food, and the cereal, which is mostly what kids eat, from Fukushima Prefecture itself. Remember, the food's banned in 14 prefectures. So Fukushima is the very last prefecture you're going to be wanting to consider. But last year, just before he stepped down, he removed restrictions on all prefectures for everybody else. But 2.5 years ago, he removed it for the children. That's a whole different level of evil. Let me see if I can find that. Boris, there it is. Boris the Monster. This was a couple of years ago. I'm drinking peach juice from Fukushima. I got the clip on my computer. I can actually play it, I suppose. Hang on. I got it. I got it.
Fantastic, delicious. Is this peach juice or what?
Yes,
what's
it is.
Nectar. This is delicious. Fantastic.
Sorry, hang on. I got to adjust that wicked volume. That's a bit. That's a kind of a bit overboard. He doesn't even know what it is, and he's going, it's delicious, it's delicious. It's Fukushima peaches, right? Now watch this. He doesn't actually know what it is, but look at his reaction.
Fantastic, delicious. Is this peach juice or what?
Yes,
what's
it is.
Nectar. This is delicious. Cheers, everybody.
Okay.
Here's everybody in Fukushima. Delicious. Yum.
He never even got his lips wet. He never even got his lips wet. See the little... And he was almost going to spit it out. He was saying, delicious, delicious. What is it? Fukushima. Nectar. What is it? You sure it's peach juice, is it? It hasn't even tasted. It's delicious. It's delicious. It's probably one of the scariest things I've ever seen besides this one. This was pretty scary too. He should be shot on sight, really. Energy and security boost the Sprouts Physical Uranium Trust Miners ETF. Sprout was created to artificially inflate the price of uranium, to create an artificial bear's market in the stock market. And so they bought up the physical uranium. They didn't take possession of it. They left it where it was. You just bought it up, and they wouldn't sell it to anybody. They bought it cheap because uranium flatlined, right? It actually flatlined the day after they announced my conviction. Which was a big celebration, right? That was a slap suit that they brought against me to shut me down and to try to smear me. They successfully did. But I didn't do anything wrong. You know, I done the right thing. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't hesitate. Ever. The industry is disgusting. And normally that's how an activist gets noticed. They get arrested. But if me getting arrested, I was a boogeyman. Any other activist gets arrested, that's how they get noticed. With me, I'm scumbag. Not that they're going to call it to my face because we'll pull the head off their shoulders. Coal and nuclear plants may speed up reactor builds in series. So again, right, they're talking about replacing coal plants with small modular reactors that don't even exist, which is exactly what the geothermal company, Quasi Electric, a couple of months ago came out and announced that they could go dig down into the earth, tap into geothermal anywhere by evaporating it with like lasers, but not lasers. Because the problem with some places is your drill bits, which they say is a $50 billion market now, by the way, for geothermal, just the drill bits. But with lasers, you can evaporate the rocks, tap into 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And nuclear industry freaked out and said, well, we can do it too. Yeah, but you don't have a product. Geothermal is already prolific worldwide. Count on nuclear to be a scumbag, right? And you'll never be disappointed. That's the one thing you can count on. Nuclear is a degenerate monster. And whatever's the most disgusting thing to do, nuclear is going to do it. How's our wonderful poll doing tonight? Are nuclear disease factories, also known as reactors, power plants, and nuclear disease factories known as fuel rod pools, doomsday machine? And we got an amazing 60 votes. Almost 100% of people got it. Where am I to here? There I be. Well, we got a stunning 20 people on our show tonight. It was amazing. If you work really, really hard for a decade, you too can get 20 people on your show. It's amazing. I think it's stunning that a nobody like me, after a decade of hard work, never early, never late, brutal routines, come up with documentation, research expeditions year after year after year, and you can finally reap the rewards and get 20 people on your show. I'm censored. They're censoring the shit out of me tonight for some reason. Oh, that's the poll. I knew that before I started the show. The poll would freak them out, and the lobbyists over at Google would just throttle me, right? I guess we're going to have to call it a night. I have to find some music to call it a night with. The Ninth Sympathy seems like a pretty good choice. Look, that was a long day today. That was a brutal day. We got through it though. We got 2 donations. We got 2 donations last night. With a flip to it. We got William D. donated $6 and Ralph R. donated $6. I'm assuming they were friends. Well, let's each send them a little donation at the same time. That was very nice of you. Thank you. I'd like to have 1,000 people do that, and we can destroy the nuclear industry. Everything helps, though. Right now, we got so many breakdowns, I can't even keep up with it anymore. And I'm so stressed out, I'm just not going to try because it's too much stress, right? Pipeline of no regrets. New nuclear schemes need expediting. Again, right? Pipeline of no regret. More nuclear, more disease factories. We're not going to get to that tonight. Bulletin of scumbags, scientists. How come the Greenpeace has never tweeted out this picture? I sent it to them over and over and over. They never tweeted it out a single time. Thank you, James. You're amazing. Good night, everybody. Dana Nasana, thank you for moderating. Don Vincent, let me shout out for everybody. Blue Jay, we've been at it for 2 hours, 15 minutes or something. Might as well do a shout out. What's the big deal if I go another few minutes? Albert, hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the other side tomorrow night. It's Tuesday, day 3 for us. We start on Sundays. Kagan Looking Glass, thanks for popping by. I appreciate you being out there and being vocal and being honest. Albert, good night, everybody. Have a great night. I know Coletta S. is out there somewhere. She's not there now. She'll be there later. And Stephen Young is out there somewhere. J-Man, Momo, Mimo. Put your glasses on, Dana, when you're reading the small screen so you don't sound like a moron. Roger that. Well, actually, I can't stop sounding like a moron. I am a moron. I'm fighting the nuclear industry. You got to be a little bit crazy to fight them. Vitra, well, we got no choice, right? We're not fighting them because we're bored or we think we're going to win. We're fighting them because we got no choice. Daryl Murray, John Shiflett, Stephen Young was there. Hi, Stephen. Richard McCann. Hi, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Peaceware. Like, you know, the hardcore are going to be hardcore whether they show up in the comments section or not. They're going to show up on it. Watch the video. It's here for you whenever you get a chance, right? I'm almost through the names. Just doing a quick shout out before we call it. Before we call it a night. I read comments after anyway. Or the next morning, depending. James Ward. Yeah, I hope Kevin Blanche is doing okay. I know Kevin's got a brutal recovery. It's hard, and even when you're doing it, it's hard to see through that you still got a long way to go. So I hope he don't push himself too hard. Brian S. It's a brutal recovery ahead. Another Gmail, the bat, or Tin Bat or something. If I click too fast, I don't get to see shit. John Curtis. Got a couple great callers tonight. And great points. We had such a big show, I never got through it again. It's better. I like having the callers. Just breaks the conversation up anyway. But I knew at the beginning of it, I gave out my number, so call in if you want to. I don't care. It's just I do so much work. If I can't get through it, I'll try to get through it the next night, right? But once it starts piling up, sometimes I can't catch up. There was 6,000 headlines plus from last year we didn't get to cover. And I'm still cranky about that. I still feel that I'll get it done. One more boo at the poll. Are nuclear disease factories, aka nuclear power plants and nuclear fuel rod pools, doomsday machines? That's unequivocal. That's unassailable. That's a fact. That's exactly what they are. Fast thinker. One more check. Here we go. Okay, that's it for us tonight. That's us for tonight. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. We'll go easy tomorrow night. We'll try to keep it under 2 hours. I should try to finish up, but my throat is too raw. Which is a great reason for phone calls. You should wait for a little later so you can give me breaks so my voice can get a chance to recover instead of early when my voice is already good. I don't care. Call whenever you feel like it, but... Centrifugal force. Good night, John. Don Vincent. Everybody. Angels Place, I'm sure, is out there somewhere. I'm off. Sayonara. We'll see everybody soon enough. Take care.